Star of stage and screen Craig McLachlan has been up to a bit of mischief. So we've gone to Tom Croydon. That's right, the man from Blue Heelers that we saw on our screens for 12 years, John Wood, to find out all about it on a Legends of Bevo exclusive.
And I thought, oh God, this guy's a whacker, and had an amazing reputation of being a bit of a dickhead. Hi, I'm John Wood, Gold Logie winner, star of stage and small screen, not so much the big screen. And I'm very happy to be here today talking to Bevo on his show, Legends with Bevo.
Welcome to Legends with Bevo, thanks to Anytime Fitness Glenelg.
John Wood, great to have you on Legends with Bevo for a chat. How are you going over there in Victoria at the moment? Other than writing this wonderful book, what have you been doing to keep yourself busy?
Working in the garden, that's mainly what I've been doing. I haven't done anything at all since the David Williamson play crashed and burned due to COVID back before Easter. So it's been a long time between drinks.
Yeah, I can just imagine. A lot of people have been saying the same thing. Their gardening has been something they've been doing a lot of, and it's interesting hearing people's different hobbies and things that you find yourself doing during lockdown.
Well, it's like a jungle out there. So I've had, it's not something I've wanted to be doing as a hobby, but it's just bloody hard work.
Yeah.
A few years ago, about 10 or 12 years ago, my brother talked me into planting half an acre of grapes out there, and that's just another rod for your back.
Let's talk about your book, How I Claw My Way to the Middle. I've just got this up on the screen right now. Hey, I wanted to ask you as well, because I feel as though you're selling yourself short. You're one of Australia's finest actors and well-known around Australia and around the world for what you've done with Blue Heelers, obviously Rafferty Rules and on stage as well. In the name of the book is How I Claw My Way to the Middle, but the middle, I reckon you're selling yourself short. You should definitely be right up there with the best. Why couldn't it be I claw my way to the top?
Well, thanks for saying so. I don't know. I'm not convinced that there is a top in the Australian industry. The reason I called it that was because I just thought it was a funny name, and there's something nicely ironic about it. But it also, I think, sums up my career in many ways. I don't feel like, I'm fairly well known in the industry, and I picked up my granddaughter the other day from school, and one of her classmates' mothers went nuts. And my granddaughter, when we were getting into the car, said, "How famous are you?" And I thought, well, I said pretty famous, I guess, but certainly amongst primary school mothers, I guess. But I sort of, I feel like if I'd wanted to get to the top, really to the top, I should have gone overseas. I should have gone to the UK, but I have no desire to go to Hollywood. It sounds like a horrible place. Although it does pay well, that'd be nice. But I've never had any desire to go overseas and work. I've always believed, I grew up in Croydon, which is about 20 k's to my right, and I went to Ringwood Tech and Ringwood High School, and I always thought that if I had anything to say as an actor, it was to those suburban people, the urban Australians that I went to school with. And, I don't know that going to London and becoming famous and speaking with a Pommy accent is really what appeals to suburban Australia. So, you know, like I have no real regrets about not having done it, but you know, it has occurred to me lately that maybe I should have had a go, because I've done, you know, in Australia, I've done most of the first productions that were originally done in London by Albert Finney, and I, you know, maybe it would have been a good idea to go and have a go to test myself against the people who are purportedly the best. But anyway, look, you know, didn't happen. And,
you've got a lot to be proud about anyway.
Yeah. Look, I'm very proud of shows like Rafferty's Rules. I think that was really groundbreaking Australian television, and without it, you wouldn't have ever seen things like Sea Change, which, you know, basically exactly the same idea, but in reverse. Instead of a country magistrate coming down to the city, you've got a city magistrate going down to the seaside. And, you know, it was, as I said, really quite groundbreaking. The scripts were absolutely fabulous, and the major characters were really beautifully written and beautifully played. And
you got nominated for an amazing 9 years in a row for the Gold Logie, and then finally in 2006, you won the Gold Logie. But you said it was bittersweet in your book, though, John. Tell us more about that.
Well, bittersweet in as much as that by the time I won the Logie, by the time I won the Gold Logie, I won several other Logies over the years, but by the time I won the Gold Logie, it was the 10th year I'd been nominated, but we already knew that the show was finished. You know, the show had been cancelled, and we'd all been given the arse, as it were.
I shouldn't laugh, but it's certainly something, again, to be very proud about. And since then, you've done some great stuff on stage, and you started doing Dr. Blake Mysteries until the sad situation happened with Craig McLachlan. Just give us a few words about working with Craig.
Well, Craig is, to be honest, you know, when I first heard I'd be working with him, I did an episode of, I did a series called The Cut, which was about a sporting agent, and Craig came on as a guest, with a guest role in that. And I thought, oh God, you know, this guy's a whacker, and you know, like, had an amazing reputation of being a bit of a dickhead. And I thought, oh, you know, but he was tremendous, you know, and he was one of the hardest working actors I've ever met. He really put in the hard yards, and on Dr. Blake, I had enormous respect for him, because it's very hard work, and he just took it all on board, and he had, you know, he had the bulk of the dialogue all the time, which meant he had the bulk of the learning. You know, he had to learn and he had to learn the mystery, you know, which none of the rest of us did. We just were there doing little bits and pieces occasionally, but he was carrying the whole load of this show, and I think he did a spectacularly good job. I think he created a really memorable and wonderful character, and you know, like, I was amazed to hear that he'd been misbehaving. I had no indication of it when I was on set.
That's interesting.
As I said, he's one of the hardest working actors I've ever met. I wasn't aware of anything untoward happening, and I mean, you know, like, he is a bit of a potty mouth, there's no doubt about that, and I was just impressed, you know, with the way he kept the crew elevated and animated. You know, he used to muck around with them all the time, and you know, he insulted them. He called the clapper load DLB, the dirty little bastard, and you know, like these people, these young people, absolutely adored him because he just constantly included them in his repartee and made them feel really special. And as I said, I wasn't aware of anything untoward going on, and you know, we had two clapper loaders, one young guy, DLB, and a young girl, you know, and he treated them both equally, you know. If he said anything offensive about the girl, he'd say it about the boy as well. But it was, you know, so there was nothing overtly sexual in anything that he did, and no one was more surprised than I was when those charges were laid against him, most of which came from the Rocky Horror Show, which, you know, like I'm not a big fan of the Rocky Horror Show, to be honest, and I didn't see Craig play Frankenfurter. I don't care. Well, I don't care whether he's gay or not. I just don't want it in my face all the time. And that was Rocky Horror for me. I was not that impressed with it as a show, and it clearly gives the character, the actor playing Frankenfurter, a lot of liberties, and maybe, you know. But as I said, I was not aware of anything happening at all, and I wasn't.
No, you've answered it. You've answered it very well. Let's get back to yourself though, and obviously, you've always had a passion for acting, so much so that you failed out of high school, and you know, because you always wanted to be an actor. When did you first get that passion though for acting, John?
I guess it must have been about second form, when, you know, up until then I was very good at my schoolwork, and I was the top of Form 2B. And then I, for some reason, got interested in acting, and once that happened, I was just totally lost to proper schoolwork. I was only ever interested in working in the theatre after that, and my whole career in television, which has been notable, as you pointed out, and very successful, was purely accidental. I never had any desire to work on television. I always wanted to work on stage, but funnily enough, the first job I ever had, first paid job I ever had as a professional actor, was on a TV show called Barrier Reef, and I just graduated from NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art, and I was waiting to start work at the Old Tope Theatre, which was the equivalent of the Melbourne Theatre Company or the Sydney Theatre Company at the time, and I'd just finished my diploma of acting and was waiting to start there when I got offered a job on Barrier Reef, which was made by the same company who made Skippy the Bush Kangaroo.
Oh.
And then spent 10 days on the beautiful Whitsunday Passage on a sailing ship, which was, you know, a great way to start.
What a way to start. Yeah, you couldn't get much better than that.
Yeah, and I thought, gosh, if the business is like this, what a great time I'm going to have. But, of course, it never happened again.
And you also had an interesting childhood, and you had some rather interesting jobs as well, John, obviously to pay the bills, and one of those being working as a clerk for the Victorian Railways, where you actually had to carry a gun with you when you were doing your job. Tell us more about that.
Only occasionally. I was working at a place called the Dining Car Depot, which is where they service the interstate trains, you know. I had to do the pays once a week, but the money used to then come down from Spencer Street, and this automatic revolver would arrive with the pays in a calico bag, and I had to carry this calico bag back to head office, and I would carry it, this calico bag with a revolver. Well, it wasn't a revolver, it was an automatic pistol, but and we were never given any lessons in how to use it. We were just given this gun in case anybody came and tried to rob us while we were doing the pays. And then I would carry the gun in a calico bag back to Spencer Street headquarters.
Oh,
thankfully, nobody ever tried to take it off me or forced me to use it, but it was a very silly situation, I thought.
Yeah, definitely something interesting.
Those were the days, yes.
And let's go back to your acting. And what do you think made Blue Heelers and Rafferty Rules such two successful shows, especially Blue Heelers, I mentioned at the top, being one of the biggest rating shows of all time in Australia?
Yes, I think it was probably the bucolic nature of the show, I think people really liked the idea of living in a town like Mount Thomas, that country town, the sort of place where I grew up in Croydon, where nobody ever locked their doors and people would just come round and go, "Oh, you're home," and you go, "Yeah," and people would just come in and out of your house, and I think that sort of bucolic history was what appealed initially to the viewers of Blue Heelers. I think they loved the idea of a country town. I mean, country practice had been equally popular. It went from being this bucolic country town where everybody left their doors open to being the crime capital of the Southern Hemisphere. We solved so many crimes in Mount Thomas. For a small town, we had, a major crime and a couple of minor crimes every week that we solved and saved the people of Mount Thomas from these criminals. But it was a very different, it became a very different sort of a show.
What about on set? Was there, did you guys have a lot of fun, a bit of banter, or was it very serious most of the time, John?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, we had a great relationship with each other, the actors, and then we had a fantastic relationship with the crew. And we worked with the same group of people virtually unchanged for the entire 12 years. And people would say to me, "Oh, didn't you get bored?" And I said, no. I think of the scenes that took place in Tom's office. There'd be me and maybe one or two of the other coppers and maybe a guest artist who was being aggrieved or being a criminal, and then also within the room we had two boom swingers, that held the microphones over our heads, and two cameramen, one sitting on one side of the desk and the other one sitting behind me shooting over my shoulder. And we spent, 12 years together in that room, all, with this extraordinarily close relationship. And, I think we just loved working together, and we loved each other, and we had a sensational time, and they're not just those members of the crew. There'd be a continuity girl and maybe the director in the room as well. And although the director often went back to watch on screen what was going on, but oftentimes they would be in the room with you. So there was tremendous
camaraderie and
closeness.
Wonderful.
It was wonderful. It was a wonderful job, and I was immensely sorry when it finished. I was, I'd still be doing it today given the opportunity. But
that makes sense why it was so successful, and why you had so much fun, because, like you said, when you're working together all the time and you get along so well, it always makes success, doesn't it?
Well, not necessarily, but it did in that instance, and the friendships. Like I did a Zoom meeting with Geelong Arts Centre a couple of weeks ago, and William McInnes was on the show, and Francis Greenslade, and Francis had been in Blue Heelers as a guest artist 5 times, I think he said, and Bill, of course, had been there right from the start for the first 6 years, and I'd just forgotten how well we knew each other and how close we were. And that Zoom meeting was just absolutely wonderful. Bill, of course, had 2 children while we were doing the show, while he was on the show. And his son, who was born while we were doing the show, is now 29.
Wow.
I can't, Stella, I think, is 23.
Hasn't time just flown?
Oh, it's amazing, And Lisa, of course, was the same age as my eldest daughter, and having her in the show was like working with my own daughter. It was a wonderful relationship, and I mean, and she's such a great girl and a terrific actor, and William, of course, I think is one of the best actors I've ever come across. He's incredibly funny man, and I remember very early in our time together, he would tell stories about his family, and I said, Bill, you've got to write all this down. This is some of the funniest stuff I've ever heard. And he, of course, has become a great writer over the last 10 years, and has written many of the stories that I've read in those books were stories that he told me when we were first together. And he's a great writer and a great raconteur, and but such a fantastic actor, and he's almost as dismissive of his talent as I was. My father once said to me when I was very young, I don't know what you want to do that acting for. It's a bloody sissy sport. And I said, well, I don't think so. But I think Bill's father was pretty similar, and I think Bill took it on board more than I did. And I think he actually, sometimes he would do things and you could tell that he wasn't quite in the moment. He was, he could see himself looking like a dork because his father had said, something similar to what my father had said, acting's not a real job.
Well, both of you have proved them wrong pretty well, I think, there.
Yeah.
Hey, before I let you go, I want to tell you an interesting story. So Rory Noak, who does a wonderful job of filming and editing my videos here at PodBooth in Adelaide, his uncle, I should say, drew you in the Archibald Prize back in the day, John. Can you believe it? What a small world.
Oh, yes. That painting, believe it or not, there's a lovely actress named Anne Wood who lives in Preston, and I did a show with her. I went to visit her one day in Preston, and she said, "Your picture's on the wall of my lawyer." Anyway, I went with her to have a look, and it was the painting by John Laurie.
Amazing.
Yeah,
there you go.
Which I had never seen since it had been completed. But there you go. And I think, did I hear Rory say that he was at Ringwood High?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, which I went to I went there for 18 months. But I initially went to a technical school because my mother believed that I was good with my hands and would therefore make a good cabinet maker. But she couldn't have been more wrong. I was absolutely hopeless at all that stuff.
I must say, John, this has been an absolute pleasure having you today on Legends with Bevo. Don't forget to buy this great book, How I Claw My Way to the Middle, and hopefully we'll get to meet you one of these days if you come to Adelaide and do one of your book signings, John.
Well, I hope so. I hope I'll be over there again with a show called Senior Moments later in the year, next year. But I think we're coming over with the monologue series that Max and Jean and I are doing. So hopefully I can do some signings, and hopefully people will come along and see the show.
Most definitely.
And just to any producers out there, I'm available.
PodBooth. Sounds so good.